that was fighting for gay rights, and people were killed.
Nobody was killed at Stonewall.
Nobody was killed.
When it comes to Rue Girls, there's a pretty heavy abundance that we can look at. Yet out of all the queens that have entered the workroom of RuPaul's Drag Race, there's never really been one quite like Katya.
Don't joke about that.
The way that almost any person that watches her seems to gravitate towards her sense of comedy really highlights how well she was showcased for viewers on both seasons she competed on. Currently, Katya is among the most successful queens to have ever graced the show, with a good portion of her fan base finding out about her through the success of her YouTube series with Trixie Mattel. So in this video, I wanted to explore the career of Katya, but I also take a look into the challenges that it meant for her to adjust to what would end up becoming one of the most extreme fan bases to ever rally behind a queen.
My question is for Katya. Katya, when you become a professional science, what is the first thing that you are going to ask your dead dad?
Oh, great question. I'd probably just ask him to say, is this a skin tag or a...
Are you gonna lick it?
I don't know. Oh, that's a bridge too far. But thank you for your question. You can take a break.
Sorry, Mom.
But before we start, please make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and follow me on Twitter @GreenGayYT for updates on future content. On December 8th, 2014, the promo for season 7 was released, despite the fact that the premiere wouldn't happen until 3 months later in March 2015. Back in the day, Drag Race seasons tended to be announced around the last month of every year, a trend that would begin to change with season 8 that didn't release their promo until February 1st, 2016, and only had 1 month until the first episode aired. Anyway, when the season 7 cast was announced, people got the vibe that Katya was just trying to be a knockoff version of Willem, mostly because she presented her drag character with a bimbo attitude and was talking about wanting to steal stuff from set. I mean, just look at this comment thread from one of the Meet the Queens. Yet despite criticisms, her personality ended up being completely different from what we would see as the episodes began to air. The promo theme itself was a huge miss. The choice to have it be simplistic after the over-the-top trailer that we got with season 6 just made it seem sort of boring, especially for a drag show. But nevertheless, Katya getting cast on the show was quite the turning point in her life. She stated that before getting on the show, she was actually planning on going to grad school to be a licensed mental health counselor. I mean, could you imagine Katya giving you psychiatric advice? Katya has said that going into season 7, she didn't fully grasp just how intense the experience was going to be. From the moment she walked into the workroom, she had a rush of regret that hit her, thinking that perhaps she wasn't all that ready for television. She was also used to getting along with everyone back in her hometown, so it was sort of a culture shock to now be in a room filled with shady drag queens, a bunch of cameras staring her down, and the pressure of needing to showcase herself to the best of her abilities in a competition that will determine the future of her career. It's throughout the filming of this season that Katya would end up developing a close friendship with Ginger Minj and Pearl, because they were all part of the smokers group, which were frequently allowed to go outside to get their fix of nicotine. On season 7 episode 1, Katya walked into the workroom speaking Russian, which did fool me the first time I saw this because I fully thought that they had gotten a Russian drag queen to be on the show.
I'm on accent. And I'm just your average run-of-the-mill Russian bisexual transvestite hooker. Is this the Schulman bar mitzvah?
The main challenge was for the queens to create a tearaway that reveals their naked runway, resulting in most of the looks being blurred once it aired on television. Katya says that she didn't know they were supposed to bring spray painted bodysuits and expected everyone to just be naked, which is why she, alongside Violet Chachki, literally showed Rue that they were born naked and the rest is drag. Throughout her run, Katya dealt with a lot of insecurity that impacted her success on the show. For example, on season 7 episode 2, Katya had gone out of her way to request one of the spoken word roles for the Glamazonian Airways challenge, but the stress of the environment resulted in her forgetting the words both times she performed it. Ultimately, she was placed in the bottom 2 alongside Sasha Bell, aka Frisbee Jenkins. An important thing to consider is that by the time the queens lip sync, they've been standing on stage for hours. So it's at this moment the queens tend to be really tired, in pain, stressed out, and feeling very regretful about their decisions in the competition. But that's what makes good TV. The lip sync between Katya and Sasha Bell is a timeless classic. Even to this day, I don't think we have ever seen a queen do a performance that incorporated the slow splits so seamlessly. Her outfit in itself was one of the best of the night, and since she was standing next to the worst outfit of the night, it made her look all the more better. But it's important to remember that at this point in time, Katya wasn't the superstar that we know today, because to many viewers, this moment would be the first time that you really began to take notice of who Katya was. Because despite being completely nervous throughout the challenge and showing the judges just how insecure she was while receiving critiques, only and for her to instantly snap out of it and deliver a flawless performance added a lot of credibility to her as a performer. It's on season 7 episode 5 that Katya really got to showcase her comedy skills in the Despy Awards challenge. Katya was paired with Mrs. Kasha Davis, but while Katya ended up doing well in the challenge, Kasha Davis would land in the bottom 2 and be eliminated. While Katya admits that the jokes they came up with weren't funny, she stated that her acceptance speech for Media's Tuck was one of her favorite moments from the entire season, because she remembers walking off stage thinking that her speech really represented the brand of her character. As we know, Katya is known for having her drag character be a Russian hooker, but despite using this character in her audition tape, she didn't want to overuse it throughout her run on the show for several reasons. One of which was that she was afraid it wouldn't be perceived well, and instead just come across as really cheesy, or that the judges themselves wouldn't like it. By the time we're halfway through season 7, Katya would end up having a really meaningful moment with Miss Fame and spoke about her struggles with sobriety. This moment really showcased a lot of Katya's vulnerability, especially in terms to her special connection to Miss Fame. And it's on this season that the queens had sort of separated themselves in cliques, one of which was the bitter old lady brigade versus the young fashion queens. What was funny is that from Katya's perspective, the young fashion queens thought that the older queens were ugly, and the older queens thought that the younger queens were stupid. But according to Katya, the joke was on everybody else, because she was both ugly and stupid. While the social aspect of the competition was a whole different aspect in itself, Katya felt that when it came to season 7, she was able to shine best in the confessionals by answering the questions of the story producers. She also adds that she was in love with the cameraman, who we would later on find out was Sarge. Now, during the airing of season 7, something that really helped Katya's brand was that after getting back from the filming of the season, there was still a couple months before the season actually began to air. It's during this time period that Katya dealt with a lot of anxiety over how things were going to turn out for her once the promos came out. She was extremely disappointed in herself because she didn't feel she properly showcased herself on season 7, and thought, quote, "How is it possible that I taped 11 episodes of Drag Race but managed not to showcase who my character really was?" So she felt that she should still do something now that the spotlight was on her, which is where the idea of her first YouTube series, Reflections and Regrets, came from. It's on this series where she would give her own recollection of how things transpired on every episode she was in. This series was also one of the first times where Ru Girl started to provide their own separate content that wasn't directly produced by World of Wonder. It would essentially be one of the building blocks to what would end up becoming a blueprint for future Ru Girls, with Queens in future seasons making their own official review series. It was an excellent way of Katya to take advantage of the spotlight now that it was on her, and hone in on a fan base that truly appreciated her humor. So it's no wonder that as the season would continue airing, people just wanted more Katya content to consume. By season 7 episode 11, the top 5 queens of the season had to do the Hello Kitty ball. It's here where we really got to see Katya display her Russian hooker character. But was it already too late? By the end of the episode, Katya and Kennedy Davenport ended up in the bottom 2. Obviously, this lip sync was super entertaining, but ultimately Kennedy would win the lip sync and Katya would be eliminated, placing 5th. Ironically, Katya said that she was pretty calm before and after the lip sync because she knew that Kennedy was going to kill it and send her home. So she had sort of made peace with that reality even before Ru announced them in the bottom 2. Yet she does clarify that it doesn't mean that she didn't try, but it was the first time in the whole competition where she felt like she knew exactly what was about to happen. Subsequently, Kennedy Davenport received a lot of hate for being responsible for Katya going home. There was even an ongoing argument that apparently after season 3, production made it a rule that you couldn't leave the main stage during your lip sync. So some fans really tried to argue that Kennedy should have been disqualified because she jumped off the stage. Once we get to the season 7 finale, towards the end of the episode when Ru is about to announce who the winner is, there is one final gag for the audience. As all of a sudden, Ru calls Katya's name, only to do a bit where she asks Katya for some water to quench her thirst. In a way, it sort of represented how Katya did sort of win the season in terms of fan reception, because she had all, if not the majority of the fans loving her, and most of them thinking she was robbed of the crown. Even Violet Chachki thought that if Katya had made it to the top 3, she most likely would have ended up losing.
I think the top should have been me, Pearl, and Katya, but then I would have lost.
While to many it was obvious that Ru wasn't going to randomly crown Katya the winner in the middle of the finale, if you're as obsessed with reality TV as I am, then you would know that Ru crowning Katya in this moment wasn't all that far-fetched. I mean, Paris Hilton's new BFF had a finale that had a moment where right in the middle of when Paris was about to announce the winner of the season, due to her sort of not really liking the 2 girls that had made it to the final 2, she ended up calling the name of the guy she eliminated the week before and chose him him as the winner of the season. But watch World of Wonder pull this gag in a future season. Regardless, it was clear that Katya was going to have a very solid career moving forward. Despite season 7 being filled with queens that to this day have a lot of relevancy in the fan base, it would go on to get a lot of flack for being one of the most underwhelming seasons. Although nowadays it seems that the general consensus is kind of flipped, with most people now agreeing that it wasn't as bad as people made it out to be. Yet the criticisms were still pretty valid. I mean, here we have a season that was known for its elevation of what it meant to show your fashion on the main stage, since many of the queens in the cast had really established aesthetics. Yet despite having a cast that was mostly fashion queens, the episodes consisted of mostly comedy challenges that relied on acting and improv skills. That's what kind of made it even more impressive that Violet did so well during her season, because if anything, the competition was more so stacked against her and made for a comedy queen to succeed. So now that season 7 was over and done with, as Trixie Mattel likes to say, the real race was just about to begin. An important thing to remember about Katya is that by this point she had reached the level of popularity that had only really been seen a year prior with Adore Delano, who was voted the #1 fan favorite. So Katya went from being an unknown local queen to an international drag star in a matter of weeks. This can be a big change that not everyone handles well, and it was clear that Katya was gonna have to face many challenges ahead. Specifically, the fact that some of her fans were a little bit too extreme in terms of their level of obsession with her. Katya's brand and persona gave off the vibe to some viewers that she didn't seem to have a lot of boundaries, due to the way she would always say and do some very shocking things. To make things worse, Katya's fans have given her some really weird things, from their own teeth to an amputated leg, something that Katya personally loves and endorses. Yet, despite seeming like she doesn't have boundaries, this is far from the truth. Katya began to realize just how dangerous fame could be when during late 2015, Katya had frequently been going live on Periscope, which was basically the app that helped popularize live streaming on social media. Some context here is that when Katya lived in her old apartment, there was a dumpster that was outside of her place. She would sometimes go near the dumpster to do a few periscopes from there and even used it to film some sketches on her YouTube channel. But some fans would end up figuring out the location of the dumpster by finding out that it was actually the dumpster that belonged to Katya's home bar, a bar that Katya was currently living right above. This resulted in fans vandalizing the dumpster by putting a bunch of stickers all over it, and a good portion of fans showed up at her apartment once they figured out where she lived. There was even 12-year-old kids at one point showing up at the bars that she was getting booked at, sometimes even with their parents. And while she thought that it was super cool of the parents to be supportive of their kids, it put her in a very uncomfortable situation.
I realize that I've sort of conducted myself in a way that has definitely given off the impression that I don't care about boundaries, and it's my fault. You know, you can't come to my house. You can't come to my house. You just can't come to my house. I don't even like my friends coming to my house, to be perfectly honest.
It's important to understand that for Katya, when she started drag, it was still an underground art form that was even sort of grotesque depending on how you approached it. So she was shocked when she ended up with a bunch of 14-year-old fans that ended up making a meme to refer to Katya as their mom.
You can take a break.
Sorry, Mom.
Something that while Katya found amusing at first, it quickly made her feel uncomfortable because she didn't like the sexual implications between fans calling her mom and then asking her to F them with a rake. The difference in maturity between Katya and her fans is something that took her a long time to realize. For example, during a live stream in 2016, Katya spoke about the issues of racism within the fanbase, saying that if we want to talk about how white girls and black girls are treated by fans, then we should consider the following. Jasmine Masters walked into season 7 with a really positive attitude and got eliminated by episode 3 after having a meltdown. On the other hand, Acid Betty's edit showcased her being very mean towards other queens and was the villain of the season, actively seeking out ways to make fun or come after other queens. Even the moment during Untucked where Kim Chi received a video message from Trixie and Acid Betty kept interrupting it to say how much she hated Trixie's makeup. But when she ended up going home, people were saying that she was robbed and gone too soon, while Jasmine got nothing but insults and racial slurs. So it was obvious that there was a clear racial component between the way black and white queens were treated during the show and specifically after their elimination.
The fact that I don't know how to help, like that I can get involved, but I'm so busy trying to do my career, and the thing that I want so much is to connect with people. But when you have all of these cases of a man who lies down on the ground with his hands up, who is trying to provide services to an autistic man, and he's shot by police, how does that not get I mean, this happened. This is one of thousands of cases that...
Unfortunately, there was a juxtaposition in the way that Katya wanted to handle her platform and the audience that was interacting with her. I mean, imagine wanting to discuss social issues with your fans only for them to call you mom and say that they want you to shove a rake in their genitalia. So by the time Katya went into the filming of All Stars 2, it had only been about 3 months since she filmed the finale of season 7. The preseason for All Stars 2 was really crazy because unlike how now there's millions of queens to choose from for a season, this was back when the creation of a new cast held a lot of legendary vibes to it. If you went into this season blind, it was hard to know who was really gonna win. I mean, here you had Katya that was one of the freshest queens returning, but was also one of the new queens that had sort of become an instant sensation, arguably becoming more popular than Adore Delano, who was also going to be competing alongside her. On All Stars 2 episode 1, we had the reading challenge, where Coco Montrese made the infamous read to Alaska, where she said that Katya could see her from her backyard. An explanation for this is because the border of Russia and Alaska are very close to each other geographically. But it also could have just been a reference to Sarah Palin. A fun fact is that Katya's drag name comes from an Olympic Russian athlete named Elena Zamolodchikova, who in the 2000 Summer Olympics ended up leading her team to a gold medal, just days after her father had died from radiation to the exposure of the Chernobyl disaster. So maybe that's why she chose to do gymnastics for her talent show number. By episode 2, Katya was already a frontrunner alongside Alaska, which was a surprise to nobody. And even though the following episode she almost got eliminated, Alyssa Edwards would end up saving her simply because she felt that Katya had a lot more to offer, despite her arguably being the worst performance of the episode. On All Stars 2 episode 4, the runway theme would be the twin-1 looks. According to Katya, for season 7, they were supposed to bring a fascinator runway and an all-white runway, but they never did it. So she hoped that for All Stars 2, the twin-1 looks wouldn't be used, which is why she ended up bringing a really basic outfit that she tried elevating by adding fake blood in her mouth. This bottom 3 placement was one of the most confusing of the season, because there was 3 groups of pairs, and Detox and Katya had delivered pretty much the same level of acting performance in the challenge, yet Katya was also placed in the bottom 3. Another moment from the season that was controversial was in All Stars 2 episode 6, when Katya and Alaska were in the top 2 and had to lip sync to Cherry Bomb, a performance that many felt that Katya completely embodied, but would ultimately lose the lip sync to Alaska, which was a shame since Katya would have ended up choosing to eliminate Roxy had she won the episode. On All Stars 2 episode 7, the queens were paired with a significant female family member in their life. Originally, Katya was actually supposed to be paired with her sister, but she had personal responsibilities she needed to attend to, so the next available person was her mom, which is a good thing that ended up happening because Katya's mom was a really funny character to watch on the episode. According to Katya, she and her mom are actually very similar to each other, especially in terms of the way they express themselves, but that her mom is just a slightly more toned down version of her. By the end of the episode, Katya and Detox were in the top 2, while Roxy Andrews, Alaska, and Alyssa were in the bottom 3. It's here where Alaska would end up throwing a tantrum because of how upset she was that she was up for elimination for the first time in the season, and was facing the possibility of going home. It was quite the dramatic moment that really elevated the tension in the room. Yet there's some fans that think that Alaska did this on purpose to give producers a storyline to work with, something that Alaska to this day denies, saying that she was acting how she truly felt, and that in real life she really is a sore loser. Katya herself has theorized that maybe Alaska's meltdown was calculated to give producers a storyline that would make the fans humanize her more. But that's funny because all it really did was make everyone even more annoyed at her because they didn't like that she had eliminated so many fan favorites. Once we get to the finale of All Stars 2, it was probably one of the funnest episodes to watch live. The edit gave off the impression that Alaska had walked herself into a corner by ending up with the same dynamic of the top 4 queens that she had on season 5, with Katya being the underdog queen whose odds were against her. To top it all off, Katya arguably had the best verse and performance of the whole Reggie Rochu performance, and considering the fact that over 90% of online fans wanted her to win, it wasn't all that far-fetched. A big reason why Katya felt she should have won All Stars 2 was because despite not having the best track record out of all the 3 queens that had made it to the finale, she was the one that had shown the most amount of improvement in a short amount of time. Although Katya does agree that Alaska also deserved the crown too. Towards the end of the episode, Rue asked each of the top 4 queens why they deserved to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. And after giving what was a pretty heartfelt speech, Katya would conclude by saying a phrase in Russian. And after Rue asked her what it means, she jokes and says, quote, "I have a carburetor outside that I just need to get some work on." But this is not true. What she actually said was, quote, "I'm a star forever. Thank you so much. Katya's look for the All-Stars 2 reunion was a continuation of her finale look from the episode prior, where she explained on the runway that she was supposed to be a confident and complex regal matriarch of a Russian mafia family, enjoying her last days on Earth before she is set ablaze by jealous relatives. According to Willem, during the All-Stars 2 reunion, there was one queen that did go out of their way to speak out against the hate from the fanbase, largely out of respect for Jeremy Carey, who chose not to attend the reunion after feeling mistreated by the production of the show. Apparently, whichever queen brought it up didn't make Rue too happy, as apparently she took it the wrong way, so the whole interaction was edited out. So despite All-Stars 2 being the season that really cemented Katya's legacy on the franchise, it wasn't until after she began filming All-Stars that her life began to really change like crazy. Because later on that year in 2015 is when she and Trixie would make their first collaboration together on the Wow Presents channel, which led to the first episode of their hit show. After all, this is what sort of established their presence within the fandom and elevating them to be pillars within the community. The success of the Trixie and Katya YouTube series was pretty unexpected for everyone involved. While it was clear that the show had proven to be a hit in terms of creating an audience for itself, no one saw the way that it would end up skyrocketing into mainstream relevancy. There was also an evolution that the show itself experienced, with the first couple episodes not having a lot of editing done to them, and over time you can see how Trixie and Katya hone in on the roles within the series too. Yet making their show wasn't always easy. At the beginning, neither Trixie nor Katya had any makeup team on set during the first couple seasons of the show. Eventually though, they would end up getting themselves some assistants to help out with their dragon schedule. Yet perhaps the most intriguing fact about their show is that apparently the whole series is taped by one person, who also does the lighting, sound, and works all three cameras. Honestly, it would be cool if the show could one day be nominated for an Emmy. After all, it's achieved a lot of impact within the YouTube platform. Plus, RuPaul's Drag Race is mostly considered a show geared towards the LGBT community. And while Trixie and Katya's show started off geared towards the same fan base, the fact that the platform for their show was on YouTube allowed them to be able to expand past the audience of Drag Race and into a much broader audience demographic. I mean, there's tons of people I know that had no idea what Drag Race was, but were huge fans of Trixie and Katya's YouTube show. By 2018, the success of the web series was noticed by some networks, specifically Viceland, that decided to buy one season of the show. When the news was released that Trixie and Katya would no longer be continuing their show on YouTube and would now be moving to an exclusive network, it felt like capitalism had won the battle. They would rebrand the show to the Trixie and Katya Show, and while getting on Viceland did help them break records, such as becoming the first queens after RuPaul to have their own show on network television, it didn't really go on to do much else. The Viceland project felt like it was doomed to fail from the start. While some fans loved watching their series on YouTube, it wasn't worth the time or effort to now pay for their content. On top of that, the vibe of their TV series, despite being virtually the same exact format, just felt very off. But the worst part is that, as we know, it is during this era of time that Katya would end up having a falling out with Trixie due to relapsing on her drug addiction. The breaking point in question occurred while filming an episode of the Trixie and Katya Show for the Viceland network. Katya ended up disassociating from reality, and she couldn't recognize anyone in the room, including Trixie. They would have a whole argument and were not able to continue filming. This resulted in midway through the Viceland season, Katya would be replaced with Bob the Drag Queen. And while Bob was definitely a funny co-host, there was no denying that there was a lot of uncertainty in the air regarding Katya's well-being. Eventually, it was announced that Katya had decided to quit drag momentarily, something that was shocking to many fans and even other Ru girls, especially after she postponed her own solo tour until the following year. This was concerning because really this was a time where nothing was really certain in terms of their success for the future. So many felt she should have been working as much as she could to make as much money as possible. But it was clear that she had reached the breaking point and needed to focus on herself. Things eventually started to get worse, as she ended up experiencing hallucinations and was hearing voices. And so her very concerned parents asked her to go to rehab. And so she did. Apparently, it went really well. Katya has admitted many times that she kind of put Trixie through the ringer during her breakdowns, because she was super paranoid about everything. But that through all of it, Trixie gave her grace, patience, respect, and love. And even told her, quote, "I will be here for you after this is all over." And she told Katya that if working together was too much, then she respects that. Fortunately, by the following year, Katya was back to her old routine and began touring once again, making episodes for their YouTube series and interacting with fans on social media. It was also sort of the year when Trixie really began to skyrocket in terms of her solo career, helping her build a platform that wasn't directly tied to her partnership with with Katya. This makes sense since Katya has said multiple times on their web series that while Trixie is a workaholic, she prefers to just do the bare minimum when it comes to her career, because she's already living a pretty lavish life as is. That being said, the empire of Trixie and Katya started to grow even more with the release of their first ever novel together. In 2019, Trixie and Katya announced the release of their new book. During a press interview for it, Katya said that the book was most likely going to end up starting beef with someone since drag queens tend to respond to out-of-context statements that are sent to them by fans. Needless to say, shortly after the release of the book, fans found out that Trixie and Katya had thrown some light criticism against Evie Oddly. Specifically, we all know the infamous story about how Evie Oddly purposely wore really underwhelming outfits for DragCon New York 2019, since many fans had critiqued her for not giving off winter vibes with her looks. Katya and Trixie said in their book that it was really disrespectful to her fans to not be putting any effort into her looks. So there should have been some degree of effort in selling the fantasy to them that spent a lot of money to see her. Evie Oddly would end up releasing a statement, which she began by saying that fans had alerted her to the comments that had been made in the book. And so she called out Trixie and Katya because they didn't understand that the outfits was a quote F you to society standards. Although later on she would end up changing the story to say that the reason she was wearing underwhelming outfits was because she hadn't received a $100,000 check yet. So a big part of Katya is the struggles that she's had with substance abuse throughout her life. She first began trying to be sober in 2008 and would have periods of relapse in between, but that the first time she was truly sober for over a year was by the time she competed on season 7 of Drag Race, adding that in her audition tape for season 6 she was not sober at all and remembers how when she applied she was actually high on meth in her audition tape, and she sometimes wondered if Rue noticed while watching it. During her pre-Drag Race days, her addiction issues got so bad that she stole $20,000 from a shop that she was working at the time. She adds that while she used a good portion of the money to buy drugs, she also would donate some of the money to drag pageants to help local queens with their package, and she did inevitably confess to what she did. What's interesting is that in the year that she was sober preceding her time on Drag Race, Katya was attending 3 to 5 Drug Addicts Anonymous meetings every week, because that's what helped her deal with her emotions and fears. But she was subsequently void of this complete support system while filming season 7. Sometimes I wish we could have gotten to see Katya return to All Stars with a longer time period after the airing of season 7. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm happy with how things turned out, and All Stars 2 wouldn't have been the same without her. But when you really think about it, while it's true that the version of Katya that we got to see on All Stars was an improved version of herself, the biggest contrast was simply that she had more confidence. On season 7, she had already delivered on Comedy Challenge and served some pretty good runway looks. So it was really just the confidence that needed to be fixed. Yet I do wonder how things would have turned out had Katya actually been inducted into the Hall of Fame. Nowadays, Katya is sort of detached from the fanbase. She sort of just sticks to her own little world, such as doing her show with Trixie on Wow Presents and her live reaction series on Netflix. We also don't really see her doing business endeavors in the way that Trixie does. But it's interesting that at one point, it wasn't always like that. There was a time where Katya was trying to use her platform to educate people. The main point here is that Katya's struggles in life put her in a position where she had a lot of sympathy towards social issues facing the world. But the fan reception never properly reverberated her ideas. There's a part of me that wonders that if the fanbase had been more receptive towards engaging in these conversations, then maybe Katya wouldn't have ended up sort of distancing herself from them. I want to take a moment to thank my patrons. In the Elite Pink Squad, we have Matthew Burns, Gay Uncle, Wendell Norris Realtor, and Hendrix Health TRT. In the Iconic Gay Squad, we have our lone resident, Ethan Von Queer. And finally, in the Green Squad, we have Azure, Emma Malander, Cayman Rider Furry, Franny Fishsticks, Edgar Allan Pup, O Nicole, The Only Sean, Soy Pablete, and LP. If you'd like to see your name on the screen, you can support me on Patreon. The link will be in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on Twitter @GreenGayYT for updates on future content, and I'll see you guys next time.